Hi, I'm Cameron Small. I'm a lead developer on Marauders. I'm here at the Leeds Armoury with Jonathan Ferguson here to show me some low-tech, low sci-fi weaponry to help us educate us on the game and its mechanics. So here we have the Viper.
One of them. There is another version.
There is another one. Is this a Mark 1? Is there marks version of this?
Yes, yeah, Mark 1. Although the other one's marked number 3, if I remember rightly, which gets pretty confusing.
Okay. The name Viper, I'm obviously drawn to. It's a badass name for it. Any reason why it's called that?
We don't actually know the reason for the name. There are a couple of other snake-based names for British firearms a bit later on. Well, sorry, not really relevant, but I think it's just a badass name. I don't think that
I'm fine with that answer. I'm fine with that answer.
You'd have to try and, the opportunity's gone sadly to speak to the designer, Mr. Hutton Williams, who came up with this and the other radically different versions. The number 3, but actually I think is the second one made. I think there was an interim design that we haven't ever seen. But same concept, but done very differently. This is probably the cooler of the two. It's hard to say.
I mean,
the one you chose. So.
Yes, undoubtedly so. So in our game, obviously, aiming with this weapon is impossible in terms of aiming down the sights. So we decided to lean into that.
What sights?
Exactly. So we decided to lean into that as a mechanic for our game. So some weapons have to be hip-fired only.
Right.
And this is the SMG class that falls into that functionality. We've got it chambered under a 9mm.
Yep, that's right.
My understanding is there's a hidden Sten in this case.
There is. Those of you who know the Sten would recognise this magazine well, and probably the bolt as well, but that's quite nerdy. If you look in the top, you can see the tubular section.
Hiding away there.
Yeah, with the cocking slot. But it is pretty well disguised in this shell, which was apparently designed for flotation. Well, for holding, obviously, but also for float if you had to let it go. It gives you a clue as to its intended use.
Right, commandos coming out of water.
That's what's stated in one of the reports. Not the only use for it. Any compact submachine gun is a good idea. I featured it in my book a couple of years ago because it's a rare example of a bullpup submachine gun where you've moved your firing grip so far forwards that the whole gun is set back.
So this is obviously under the armpit, which I'm going to try and attempt now.
Yep. Just watch out for this. Very unusual single point, what we now call a single point sling.
Right.
Again, gives you a clue as to how it's supposed to be held. It's designed as a one-handed weapon.
So my left hand's free here, so...
You can obviously use your second hand, but the idea was to free up your other hand to be able to throw grenades, grab wounded team members, whatever.
Yeah, be able to freely reload.
Hence no sights. No sights and the armpit stock. So
in terms of like a fire training for this thing, they're practicing on a range, firing it like this. It's just something you get a feel for, and they just know where it's going to land.
It is, yeah, to an extent. It's not ideal, and it's a real pivot from the British idea of a machine carbine, where you're using it as a semi-automatic rifle, essentially, first and foremost, and only in an emergency, in theory, would you use it as an automatic weapon. This is the opposite to that. It's automatic by default, effectively, and it's not for aiming with. You're looking over the top of the gun and relying on... It's the same phenomenon as point shooting, which is where the idea that you'll tend to look where you're pointing. And that kind of works with this. And also you can observe where your bullets are striking, just like you do in a game. That was something people did in real life.
Tracers are almost using as a guide.
You wouldn't have tracers. Tracer 9mm is a thing, but they didn't use it. So all they're doing is observing the strike of the bullet. Tracer would have been super useful for this, actually.
Not a bad idea. Might have to put it in the game. Oh, awesome. It's an amazing piece of kit. And this material is this literally just wood I'm feeling here?
Walnut wood, as is traditional, brown best and before.
Yeah. We also have a problem, there's no trees in space, but we've made up this lore that they brought all the logs over to Jupiter and they're just turning them into these weapons essentially. So we're trying to get away with that. But the main thing that strikes me is just the sound of that firing is incredible, and that is literally just down to the fact that it is a stand inside there.
Yeah, but it does kind of sounds weird, but it does sound a bit wooden.
Yeah,
when you dry fire it like that.
It contributes to that. Yeah,
it's the cocking sound. You really get the hollow sound of the stock. But of course, this is another kind of reversal because the Sten Mark I had wooden furniture on it, bits of wooden furniture, and the Lanchester before it had a traditional wooden rifle stock. So this 1943. They're doing it for very different reasons, but they're going back to old materials and the idea of a wooden stock, almost like a musket. But that's different idea.
So just to check, this is a commando weapon. You can fire one hand under your armpit. You drop in water, it's okay. There's a Sten hidden inside, and it's essentially a bullpup SMG, all rolled into one. Yeah,
and the beauty of the Sten is, and people go on about it being unreliable. We can have that argument, but it's designed to run without any lubricant. So if you just let the water pour out, it should shoot. As long as you've got good magazines.
Wow.